Well, hello again everyone. I've had a couple of good long rides out on the Suzuki Intruder since we cured the misfire on the back cylinder there. And I have used it to go into work a couple of times, but the last time I went into work on it, I had a bit of a problem. I went out at lunchtime and the front brake seized on. And yeah, I had to wait for everything to cool down before I could ride back to work again. And the same thing happened on the way home. As I rode and used the front brake, it would seize on and the front brake disc would get very hot, and obviously everything would then start to bind up and go a little bit wrong. So I stopped at the side of the road and let the whole thing cool down completely, and then I rode home just on the back brake and had absolutely no problems riding home just on the back brake. The front brake caused no issues as long as I didn't put it on. So I wonder what was going on there. Well, I've completely rebuilt the caliper, of course, so unless I've done something silly, I don't think the fault is with the caliper. It's got those lovely new stainless steel pistons, everything was cleaned up, and yeah, the caliper should be lovely. So it seems very similar to a problem that we had with the old Citroen motorhome when we first got it, where the inside of the brake hose collapsed, and when you put the brake on, it would push the fluid down, but the fluid couldn't release again. So as soon as you put the brake on, the brake stayed on, and that was the problem. So I'm wondering if that's the same issue here. Now I'm told that braided brake lines very rarely fail in that way, but this has got the old-fashioned rubber brake hose on it. So I've hunted about for a spare one online, and I have bought one. It cost me £150 at the supplier. I only had 4 of them left. I could have got a braided line, just an Ttxela braided line, for about £35–40, but I wanted to stick with the original specification for as long as I can, really. So I did shell out for the more expensive original one, and it comes with all the sort of extra hardware, the sort of coiled wire around it and stuff. So yeah, the plan today is to replace that front brake line and see if it improves the situation. Oh well, straight away I've hit a problem. I've got the new brake hose here to check it, and it's got sort of clips and things in the right sort of places, but if you line it up with the, yeah, that's never going to reach, is it? Because that's down at the caliper, and that's where it's got to get to. Yeah, no, this is too short. Ah, 150 quid. And I put in the exact spec model as well, a 1987 VS700. So yeah, I'm going to have to send this back, see if I can get my money back for it, and maybe we will have to go with the Ttxela braided line option. Well, it's been quite a few weeks since we last did anything with this Suzuki Intruder. I contacted the company that sold me the brake hose, and they sent me a returns form, and I've sent that back to Holland. I don't think I've had anything back from them. I'm pretty sure I haven't received a refund, and I haven't had any emails or anything, so that may be something I need to follow up. But I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and everyone seems to think that there's very, very little chance that that front brake hose has collapsed. Everyone suspects the master cylinder. Now, the problem is getting a little bit worse. Just wheeling the bike backwards and forwards in and out of the garage, the front brake is very difficult to move the bike against. It is rubbing quite hard. I'll show you what I mean. Yeah, it's really quite a lot of resistance there from that front brake. And the brake lever is really firm. There's almost no giving it at all. But I have had a few people mention to me about a vent on the master cylinder reservoir that they think could be the problem. So I've had a bit of a look and I think I've found it. Now I don't know if you can see, but there's an absolutely tiny little hole there, and I think that's the vent everyone's talking about. So the suggestion is to poke a little bit of wire down there and clean it out. Now I'm a bit wary of poking a wire straight in, because underneath this cap is a little rubber bellowsy thing which I guess takes up the slack, the difference in space when you press the brake levers. I think that's probably not a very good explanation, but anyway, there's a little rubber bellows underneath the lid, so I don't want to poke a wire in and damage that. So I'm going to take the lid off and see if I can just clean around that little hole area and make sure that's open. See if that makes a difference. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure all this is nice and clean. It is pretty clean anyway, but just going to get wiped down with some tool cleaner just to make sure there's absolutely nothing that can get in and contaminate that brake fluid. Now, just so I don't get brake fluid on anything, I'm going to wrap this rag. Could do with a bigger rag, really. Oh, no, that'll be alright, I think. Wrap that rag around there, just as a precaution. And now I'm going to carefully take the top off this brake fluid reservoir. As you can probably tell, I'm not a trained mechanic, and these videos aren't intended as tutorials. They're just vlogs for your entertainment as I try and get this old motorcycle back on the road. Now I think you can probably see how there is a bit of crustiness in there. There's a bit of sort of brown, dusty, corrosion type stuff in the brake fluid, so I'm not convinced that clearing that little vent will help. I think we do need to do the master cylinder. I suspect that cruddy stuff has been shaken up and pulled into the master cylinder and caused the problem. Well, the first thing I want to do is put the lid back on this master cylinder reservoir before anything slops out, because I don't want it dripping everywhere on the bike. I'm not going to put it on tight, just going to put it on sort of enough so it stops it leaking. Now, my Haynes manual says to disconnect the electrical connector from the brake light switch, but there is no electrical connector. The wire, I think, disappears straight into it. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo this bracket, which I think holds the switch on. I'm doing this because I think the easiest thing is to take the master cylinder clean off the bike. Well, there we go, that is my brake light switch. Not fiddle with that too much. Now I'm going to unscrew the banjo bolt and cable tie it to the handlebars, just to stop it hanging down and any brake fluid leaking out. Now there's supposed to be a punch mark on the handlebar where the seam of this master cylinder bracket goes, but I can't see one, so I'm just going to make one little tiny mark with this centre punch. Yeah, and that'll help me get it all aligned again. Now before I go ahead and take this off, I'm going to wrap the end of the old brake hose, well not the old brake hose, the current brake hose. Hopefully that brake hose is going to stay. I'm going to wrap the end of it in a clean rag just to stop any muck getting in there. Now these are little decorative caps that I've got to try and carefully prise off. That is easier said than done. Right, now it should just be a case of undoing these and separating it out. Make sure I don't drop the mirror. Make sure I don't drop anything. I suspect this would be easier with a grown-up helping you. You want a nice clean environment really to do stuff like this, so I'm going to work inside this stainless steel tray. But that might have to wait until Sunday because it's getting quite late and I've got a very early start in the morning. I'm off down to Reigate for the Reigate Caves open day, so I'm going to pack up for tonight and maybe go in and spend a little bit of time with Nikki, and hopefully we'll meet again here on Sunday. Well, as expected, it's Sunday now and time to crack on with sorting this master cylinder out. What's next? Well, next I reckon is to take the lever off. Right, I'm going to take the lid off and get rid of the brake fluid that's in there. Yeah, look at the sludgy mankiness in the bottom of the master cylinder there. That definitely isn't good, is it? And before it gets lost, I'm just going to pop out the little slider thing for the brake light switch. Right, now I'm going to ease off the little rubber boot on the end of the piston. Easier said than done. This is pretty manked up, this rubber dust boot, so I'm not too worried about damaging it because I have got a new one, but that's not coming out that easily. Yeah, it's more the consistency of chewing gum than how it should be. Oh well. Now right down in that little hole is a circlip I've got to get out. I suspect that is going to be tricky. I've got my circlip pliers, so let's give it a go. That's just not going to work with these circlip pliers. They're too fat to get into that master cylinder housing to get that snap ring off. So I'm going to try just grinding down the nose of them a little bit just to see if I can make them narrow enough so I can get in to release that clip. Well, there you go. Did eventually get that circlip out. Took a bit of doing though. Had to quite heavily modify my circlip pliers to make them finer to get that out. And now I can just draw the piston out and yeah, have a bit of a look at it. Now I've also popped the spring out. I think all this is in the kit to replace it, so don't need to keep any of this. I found to pop that out I did have to poke a screwdriver up the inside of the cylinder, although I did that very carefully. So now I really just need to clean this up, so I'm going to give this a good old soak in some brake cleaner. Right, because that is so manky, I'm giving it a bit of a go in the ultrasonic cleaner. Now I've got the worst of it. Right, now it's time to reassemble the master cylinder. I'm going to put the new seals, I'm going to try and use everything out of the new pack. The piston and the spring, and therefore the seals, are slightly different. I'm hoping that doesn't really matter, and once it's all one assembly it'll be okay. This was sold for the VS700, but the VS700 isn't listed on the models on the top there, so yeah, fingers crossed for this. Now unfortunately I've tried it, and as you can see this piston is actually a little bit smaller, a little bit less in diameter than the original piston, so I don't think I'm going to be able to use this. It does rattle down the bore a little bit, whereas this has a nice interference fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak these in some nice clean brake fluid. These seals don't seem too bad. It looks like I might be able to use that instead of that. They look very similar, so yeah. And of course I've got a new split ring, I think that's the same as well. So let's get these soaking in some nice clean brake fluid. I'm also going to put a bit of new brake fluid down the bore of the cylinder just so it's not dry. Right, now I'm going to put the old spring and piston back in again. Don't really like doing this. I would have rather had a nice new set of things to put in, but there you go, needs must. Got a nice action to it anyway. Right, now I'm going to try and get that circlip in. The new circlip is exactly the same as the old circlip, so I'm going to try and use that. Also just going to clean up the little slidey contact for the brake light switch. So it's nice and coppery. And of course, got to put this dust boot on. I'm going to try and use the new one. Yep, perfect. Right, now I'm going to put the lever back on. Put a little bit of this lube stuff on it. Right, so time to get that master cylinder mounted back on the bars. There's no torque setting specified for these, and remember I made that little punch mark to show me where it all lines up. So yeah, let's do that. Yeah, don't think we need to go crazy on these, just tight enough. Then got those little decorative chrome caps to go back on. I'm also going to give this brake light switch contact a bit of a clean with some spray contact cleaner and just a little tiny bit of emery paper. Right, now let's put the contactor in there and fix that back up again. Right, next I'm going to put the banjo bolt back on. Be nice to have a nice new one with new washers, but yeah, I'm going to reuse the old ones because I haven't got a new one, but yeah, fingers crossed. Again, I don't have a torque setting listed for this, so just tighten up. The old 2-finger torque wrench. Yeah, that'll do. Don't want to go crazy. Right, now I'm going to top up this reservoir again with some nice new brake fluid. Now, just need to bleed the brakes. I'm going to use this vacuum brake bleeder because I'm trying to do it on my own. Well, I have to say, that's not binding at all. Brakes seem good. They come off after they've gone on. Wheels forward and back nice and freely. So I'm hoping that's good. Let's start it up and go for a bit of a test ride. Well, I took it around the block a few times here in the local village, just so that if there's any problems it wouldn't be too far to push it back again. But there were no real problems, and filled it up with petrol, and I've taken it on a good long run. Got it up to 70 mile an hour on some deal carriageways, and yeah, tried lots of braking and had no issues. So yeah, I think I can declare this a success. The Suzuki Intruder is back on the road, and yeah, I am fantastically pleased. So yeah, all good.